All right, let's stay with the story now and speak to SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. Thank you so much for your time, Sophie. It's quite an interesting one that the former president, has to say, and the take that he has on this one, especially because a lot of focus has been on the UN Security Council and the different role players there, and how that has also compounded this, what was happening on the ground and the talks as well, but also this push for a two-state solution that a lot of people have been talking about and listening to his views. It's quite interesting, when he talks about just some complexities just around that.
Well, yes, of course. I was surprised yesterday when he came with that proposal or perspective that forget the two-state solution, look at one state and implement the federal system. And therefore, that was something new. And he is saying this because his argument is that, unfortunately, both sides have now admitted that the two-state solution is not possible under the circumstances. As you are aware that since the bombardment of Gaza and now Rafah, the situation is quite tense, and you are not going to arrive at the two-state solution. And therefore, the other issue that he spoke about is that unless the permanent 5 members of the Security Council are serious about ensuring that you have these countries living side by side, or these nations living side by side, you are not going to have a solution in that protracted conflict in the Middle East. Him saying that, for example, a country like the United States of America will always use its veto power to ensure that they stop anything that's not in the interest of Israel. And therefore, him saying that this matter is quite complex, and therefore you need sober leaders to confront this matter and agree and be brave to accept the very unpopular position of one state.
And yesterday, of course, as all this is happening, Israel is supposed to send its report to the ICJ as well, given the court order that we saw from that international court. Did that happen?
Yes, indeed, Israel did submit a report to the International Court of Justice. I spoke to my sources within international relations. I'm told that South Africa has received the report, but unfortunately, the International Court has requested member countries not to make the report public. I think the court will go through the report and also look at what has been happening, what has been reported in terms of compliance. But many people will agree when you watch the news. I mean, this Middle East story is a top story all over the world, every day. And therefore, you can see the bombardment is continuing. Palestinians are being pushed out of their settlements. Palestinians don't have access to water, don't have access to food, don't have access to electricity. There's no fuel. Hospitals are being bombarded. And also, you have a situation, even the refugee camps are being attacked and people are dying. We are now talking about almost 30,000, the death toll. And therefore, there is no a sign that Israel is indeed implementing those provisional orders.
And there also, of course, talks, especially when you look at what is currently happening on the ground and the talks that are, currently now in Paris, where Hamas and Israel are discussing the possibility of a ceasefire, given what we also heard the American President Joe Biden having to say as well about the possibility of a ceasefire here. Is there any update from those particular talks?
The only word we had was from the President of the United States of America yesterday, Joe Biden, I mean, in a very casual form. And the question is, when you look at his body language, even having an ice cream, the question is, how true is that kind of information? Unless you get Benjamin Netanyahu to say it. But we are told that Benjamin Netanyahu does want to ensure that come Ramadan next week, you have a ceasefire. But on the other hand, we are told that he wants a temporary ceasefire, while on the other hand, the Hamas and Palestine, they want a permanent ceasefire. And he is saying even if the entire or all the people who were taken hostage can be released, they will still continue to hunt Hamas after perhaps Ramadan. And therefore, that's the sticky point. We are waiting. The Emir is in France of Qatar. As you know, that Qatar is facilitating the talks. Maybe later tonight we might get a breakthrough or breaking news on the issue of ceasefire, permanent ceasefire, or just a provisional ceasefire.
And of course, you will bring us up to speed once, we have breaking news in that particular regard, because a lot of focus is on this particular story to see if the needle will move. Are we going to see any difference on the ground? Because a lot of concern about what's happening in Rafah, a lot of concern about just the situation and how dire it is turning out to be on the ground continues to mount. So let's see then what happens and if whether or not we will see an agreement of a ceasefire here. That was SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. Will continue to monitor the story for you. And as you heard there, even Israel has met that deadline of the International Court of Justice to submit its own report on what it has done. Remember, the court had ruled that Israel needs to report back to the court to show in its own words efforts to prevent a genocide on the ground. So we do understand that that report has now been submitted. So we'll continue to monitor that for you and to see whether or not there is a breakthrough in the ceasefire talks.